Hey, Envy family. Welcome to the Neutral Voices Studio, the place where your voice matters. I'm Dr. V, your host for tonight's Voice of the People show, where we allow you, the people, to leave comments and ask questions and be a part of our show. Be sure to ask plenty of questions and leave all the comments you want. And please don't forget to click like and share.
Yes.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tonight, we have an amazing guest in the house. Jill, who do we have?
Tonight, we have Crystal Kelly joining us. Crystal
Kelly?
is a licensed mental health counselor who is a true Rogerian at heart. She has a passion for helping people to be the best version of themselves. Crystal has 10 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and adults dealing with depression, anxiety, life stressors, and grief. She gained most of her experience working at Park Center, where she completed her internship in dialectical behavior therapy. After graduating from the University of St. Francis with her master's degree in mental health counseling, she had the opportunity to gain experience in crisis intervention, completing assessments, and outpatient therapy at Park Center. Crystal received her Bachelor's of Art in Psychology and her Master of Science in Mental Health Counseling, also from the University of St. Francis. She enjoys providing trauma-informed trainings and outreach services. Crystal is the founder and current president of the Society of Black Mental Health Professionals, in which their mission is to inform, educate, and empower the Black community about mental health. Last but not least, she is a proud member of ONV, which is Our Neutral Voices, a non-for-profit organization that is a grassroots community builder. She will be helping our community thrive, fighting one mental health problem at a time. She is truly an inspiration and a blessing for our communities. So let us welcome Crystal Kelly.
Hey, Miss
Wow.
Crystal, how
Hi.
you doing?
I'm
How you
well.
doing?
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. So, this subject, is this right up your alley?
It's right up my alley.
It's right up your alley.
Okay, well, good. So we're going to recap just a little bit to bring our audience up to par.
Yes.
And so last night we talked about fear.
Fear.
And we had, I would say it was a dynamic conversation.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes.
We went
So
to church too.
We did.
I was going to say,
Hallelujah.
we
Yeah.
did. And so, yes. And so we want to thank Ms. Deshawn, First Lady Deshawn Moore, for hanging out with us too last night
First
and
Lady.
making it a great set as always. And so anyway, so fear, what comes to mind? What stuck out last night that you guys may want to touch on a little bit?
We talked about a lot of things. I think we started off talking about fear as being a prison. And one of the things we touched on is, well, I spoke on, and some other people spoke on some other things, but the point that I spoke on is, I think our prison and fear is things that we've been taught and been passed down to us.
Yes.
That we just buy into things being as they are. So our fears are not genuine all the time. They're things that are being taught to us and fed to us. And we just live in those preconceived notions,
Right.
in those fears, and we don't come out of them because we don't know how to come out of them because nobody taught us how to come out of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Something that I really thought about our conversation last night is, a lot of times when we speak on things, not everybody can really relate, or you haven't been there, or you haven't experienced it. Fear from the time that you are a little, a toddler.
Yes.
This is something that every single person has experienced in some part of their life and probably always will,
That's
depending on what stage you're in or your experiences. So definitely stick with us tonight if you missed us last night, because we're going to talk about something that you've been through or that you're probably going to go through eventually.
Absolutely.
Well, you have to understand, and one thing I got out of it, fear is actually a lack of vision.
Right, right.
So, that's one of the key things about it. If you fear your vision instead of stepping out on faith and having that courage to step out, I honestly believe when you step out on courage, fear leaves you.
That's
Okay.
powerful right there.
So, that's where we have to understand, we need to step out on courage.
Yes.
And courage, I run through that whole
Fearless.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah, you're fearless. So now when you
Yeah.
got that courage, that means you leaping out on faith.
That's right.
So once
Okay.
you leap out on faith,
Bold in it.
yeah, you bold. Fear out the window.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And I know one of the things that I mentioned was dealing with the prison or fear as a prison. What it looks like was when I talked about the walls of stress, and it's so much stress around people. They begin to build
Right.
these walls of stress,
Right.
and so it's basically like a prison
Yes, it
around
is. It
you.
really
So
is. It really
from
is.
your job to the family, and the dog, the car, the weather. I mean, there's so many things, and then not to mention COVID on top of it,
Right,
and
right.
so all the other things that start
Yes,
taking
fear
place in
is
the
just
world, and so that was one of the things. And we also talked about different obstacles
yes.
that gets in the way when it
Yes.
comes to fear. And so, what do you think about when you think about obstacles related to fear?
I think obstacles related to fear are artificial. I think
False
we
evidence.
make them bigger than what they are because of the fear.
Yeah.
Right.
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 What types of things right now, and let's bring it home, and then so I want Crystal, I want you to be ready to chime in right here. What happened recently that you would look at as an obstacle of fear?
Well,
Anything that you can think of.
right. So I want to kind of share a personal experience that I had when it comes to fear. Knowing that I've been in school, studying, this is my profession. This is something that I had a passion for and still got a passion for.
Right.
And so the fear that came from out of that was not being able to pass my licensure exam.
Oh.
So going in there each time, taking the exam and being knocked down by not passing, that caused fear within me, thinking that, okay, maybe this isn't the field for me. But also realizing that I'm resilient. Like this is something I want. I'm determined, and not to feed into that fear. And so with that being said, I didn't give up because this is something I knew I wanted, and believing in yourself.
Right.
And so everybody has a choice. You can either feed into your fear or not feed into your fear.
Right.
Say the word.
Wow,
Say the word.
that is so good. And you know what? So one of the things I shared before on one of our shows that came from Charlemagne the God, he said, fear, and these are the two examples he gave of fear: face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. And so that just kind of falls in place with what you just said. And so that obstacle at one point was doubt, because you begin to think about what things would be like if you did not pass
That's
that
right.
test.
That's right.
But you got bold in order to go back and take it again.
I had to because that's what I wanted.
Yes.
Right. I feel you.
Wow.
I didn't give up. I did have moments of doubt. I had that fear.
Yes.
But again, I chose not to feed into it.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Do you think, Crystal, that your fear, a lot of times fear keeps us from progression, but there are some times that fear can push us?
Yeah, it gives you that motivation.
Right. Do you feel like in your case, even though it was an obstacle to begin with, do you feel like in the end it almost was what pushed you even harder?
Oh, yeah, definitely. That was my motivation right there. Not allowing Satan, not allowing those doubters for me to believe in myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so again, I know fear stops a lot of people from doing what they want to do,
That's true.
achieving their dreams. But
Right.
I'm telling you, if you put your all into it, it's going to happen.
Yes.
That's right. And we kind of briefly talked about the definition of fear. And so it was funny. What did they be? Pedia? Was that what they called it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Pedia.
I gave a very short definition, and I talked about it being an emotional response, meaning it's an emotional response to many things, and that's
Right.
when you're either going to run or fight or flight, right?
Right.
And so, but listen to this, and you talked about resilience. Fear is also when stress excels or exceeds your endurance or your resilience. And you just talked about being resilient
Right.
in that.
Right.
And so when I, ran across that, I thought, wow, that's pretty heavy right there. So,
Well, and I'm gonna get in the professional realm with Miss Crystal, because I in your bio it was read that you deal with a lot of people dealing with anxiety.
Yes.
And the root of all fears is some anxiousness, some
Yes.
kind of. Be it Doc V, you spoke of it last night, a PTSD, a trauma that has happened in the past, or something. just seems insurmountable to most people, so they get anxious about it. As you were talking about passing your licensure
Yeah.
exam, give us a professional look of what fear or what you see fear as, or dealing with people with fear as a professional.
Yeah. So I see a lot of people that deal with anxiety. Fear comes from anxiety. You know, having that anxiousness, not believing in yourself, trauma, all that comes from anxiety. And so I tell people, my clients, you got to know what your anxieties are. You got to know what your triggers are. The more you know about your triggers, your anxieties, the more that you'll be able to overcome those things. And so it's all about learning about what triggers that, and being able to do something about it.
Right.
That's right. And so as far as our environment, how do our environments lend itself to fear in our lives?
Yeah.
Whether, from being born in it is an innate at certain points, but then, it's an adaptive learning type of thing. So speak from that perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to your environment, it's about who you are around, what you are seeing every day. Even genetically, being born from, somebody who are anxious all the time. And people, especially kids, they can pick up on that. It doesn't take much for kids to feed and pick up on that energy. And so when it comes to your environment, especially when you're dealing with little kids, it's a matter of just making sure that you check yourself. The more you check yourself and know what your triggers are, your kids will be able to see that.
Right.
Because you're the first role model when it comes to how you're taking care of yourself and what your anxieties are. Yeah.
That's right. I mentioned that one of the first fears was separation, the baby being separated from the mom. And so, speak to our parents, because sometimes it's hard for parents to let students go to school, those little babies go to nursery school and kindergarten for the first time.
College,
I was going to say, and then college.
Yes.
So this is a time where parents are getting ready to lose those children, and they're getting ready to go to college. So speak to the parent, especially the single parent that may be alone. And this will be the first time, because we do understand that loneliness is also separation, and it's one of the top 11. And matter of fact, separation, the top 8 of what causes fear. So speak to those parents. Yes.
So you guys are so right when it comes to a parent, especially a single parent, letting their child go off to school for the first time or go off to college. And so it's a matter of just acknowledging that fear. It's okay to admit that you're scared, you're frightful. That's okay. But also realizing that you have to have that faith and know that you put values and you instilled in that child. Whatever values or whatever things that you guys believe in, you have to believe that you instilled that into your child, that they'll be able to make those right decisions, or they always have you in the back of their mind of what, you taught them.
Right.
And then also when it comes to that loneliness, I tell people, get a support system, having somebody that you can rely on, somebody that you can lean on when you're struggling with your loneliness. Like, everybody struggles with something, and we're born to be social people. So there's nothing wrong with speaking up and asking for help or seeking out resources that can help you with that.
But what if you like being alone?
Well, then you ought to be happy. See? You ought to be happy.
That was such a man answer. Man, that's such a man answer.
Just to be honest, I mean,
well, you
can put me in my living room when I don't even have to have the TV on, and I'm cool.
Same.
See, that's a man answer.
Yeah, I mean.
Did you say that's a mean answer?
A man answer.
A man answer. Well, Jill is saying same. She's saying that until her baby leave her.
Yeah. I'm going with her.
Yeah.
See, I just said.
Alone,
yeah. But you know what? So just to put a slight twist on that, and I heard you loud and clear. You said seek a support group or someone like that. And a lot of times Black people we just don't run to support groups, and we don't look to connect from that perspective. So, what are there any other ideas for that person that's just not going to join a group?
Before you answer that, can I add a little bit to that?
Yeah.
I do agree with that, because, we as Black people say we don't have mental problems. We just have issues.
Right.
That's been a stigma a misnomer, I should say, in our community for the longest. But do you see a difference in cultural fears?
Give me an example when you say that.
Like,
I can give you one real
okay,
quick.
go ahead,
Okay.
Doc V.
I'll say this: Public Enemy. Back in the day, they had it was a song,
Yeah.
"Fear of what?
Fear of a Black
Black
Planet.
Planet." And
Man.
and now I would say fear of a black man. Some people have that. Fear of the black atheist. Fear of the basically the black non-believers.
Right.
Because too many times people get it twisted and believe that black people are spiritual and religious.
Right.
But there are tons and tons and tons of black non-believers out there, and it's growing. Like, you just wouldn't believe. And so I believe that there's things, from that perspective that people fear, period. But I'll tell you from a black perspective, one of the things that I know people fear because we have heard them say it, fear of being black.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because what we said, fear of being black while driving.
Right.
Yeah. So, so those are some of the issues that we're having to deal with.
Yeah.
That we live in a society where it's not just the people in the communities that you may have to fear sometimes.
That's right.
It's the people that you pay your taxes to that you have to fear.
Yeah.
And so when you have the fear of the government.
Yeah. And that's what we're saying. If you can give us some insight on those points, Miss Crystal.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to the time and the age that we're living in right now, it's even more out there that it's when you go outside your door, you just never know if you're going to come back home, or if you get stopped by the police because of the color of your skin. We see that time after time after time, and people don't realize that's trauma. That's racial trauma. And so you got to be able to seek out help. If you're noticing that you get these triggers, like when you walk outside the door and, you're around other people that does not look like you start to fidget, you start to feel nervous. That should tell you, I need to really go seek some help. I really need to deal with what's causing all this turmoil that I'm having right now.
Right. That kind of goes along with, what I wanted to ask. So we as a panel talk a lot about mental health in the Black community, lack of addressing it, lack of acknowledging it, whether that be to, because of fear or because of certain stigmas. So with that being said, we've also said that a lot of times it helps to see a therapist that looks like you, that understands the racial trauma that you speak of, not to discount a therapist because they are white or Hispanic, but when you have been through certain racial trauma, it helps to be able to speak to someone who looks like you. So in your bio, it says that you are the current president of the Society of Black Mental Health Professionals, which in their mission is to inform, educate, and empower the Black community about mental health. Tell me about that. Tell me about the Society of Black Mental Health Professionals.
I'm so glad you asked. So this is something that I had a vision for years. And knowing that once I got my license, once I became like official, this was something I wanted to get out there into the community. And so this was like a couple of years ago that I had reached out to a few of my colleagues that I worked with, that I'm close to, and came up and, talked to them about this idea of getting a group of us together, that the community can see that there are Black therapists, there are Black social workers out here, especially in Fort Wayne. Because again, like you guys said before, being able to see somebody that look like you, it just makes things so much better. To have that therapeutic relationship with somebody that just looks like you, it just makes sense because they get it. And so I came up with the idea. There's about 13 or 14 of us right now who are licensed. And our mission, like I said, was to inform, educate, and empower the community. So what we've been doing since this whole pandemic, before the pandemic, was getting out in the community and just doing some psychoeducation, getting people to understand what some of these mental disorders are. Because a lot of times people go to the doctor and the doctor may say you're experiencing anxiety and don't even know what that is. So being able to educate people and let them know, okay, these are the symptoms, these are the things to look for. Give it a name. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, that's been our mission, just going out, especially into the churches. I'm very, very thankful that some of these churches here been allowing us to get in there and just educate. Because again, when we think about the black churches, you think, oh, we can't have therapists and God at the same
That's
time.
right. That's right.
That
That's
is,
right.
yeah.
Ooh.
It's okay to have God and a therapist too.
That's right, because it's been okay to have a Xantex in
Come on.
you know what I mean?
Come on.
The doctor prescribed you all these different nerve
Yeah.
pills
Yep.
in church.
That's
You know,
right.
so yeah, that's awesome. So we need to definitely know more
Yes.
about that.
I
Yeah,
have
for
a
sure.
question.
So that's the thing. That's my vision, is being able to get into those arenas, those platforms, because we know the black community is strong on their spiritual belief, but also realizing that it's okay to speak up and say, I need help. I can still pray, I can still talk to God,
Absolutely.
but also
Right.
I can still talk to a therapist. Like,
That's
I can
right.
talk to somebody that can help me with my triggers, that can help me to really understand what I'm going through.
What I'm
Right,
going through.
right.
Be
Mhm.
vulnerable so you can get some help.
Yes.
So Crystal, listen, I keep
He
wanting to
has
say,
questions.
Doctor. I know I was just getting ready to tell her this is a good place to plug how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
if you can do that right now, and then we'll have you do it again later.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a licensed therapist here in the area of Fort Wayne. I'm practicing mental health counseling at a private practice called Oak Tree Guidance and Wellness. So what you can do, you can always call my office. Our office is located right on East Washington and Coldwater. Our phone number is 260-570-4515. And then also I have the website, the Society of Black Mental Health Professionals. We have our own website.com. You can reach me through there. We have our Facebook page. You can reach me through there.
Awesome.
And also the Psychology Today is another platform where you can get on there and pick out whoever you want to see when it comes to a therapist and what you're looking for.
Wow.
So I have a bio on that platform as well.
Look at
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very
And E had a
accessible.
question for you.
She just answered.
Oh, well, good.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's awesome. Well, so real quick, so I'm just going to go back to last night just for a second. We talked about forgetting God's truth when it comes to fear. Now, so, you know, when you're talking to people, now, how do you, I don't know if you separate it or do you put God on it? How do you speak to people that's dealing with anxiety, stress, and fear as far as God's word?
Yeah. So another thing that I do Christian counseling.
Oh,
So
okay.
I have to make sure if they're talking about God, that allows me to be open and be
Okay.
able to share that as well. Because as a therapist, I can't push my religion on
That's right.
somebody. So
Okay.
I have to wait for that client to open up the door.
Mm.
And so that's where I can pull out my tools when it comes to giving them hope, giving
Okay.
them scriptures that they can look at, and just giving them that reassurance that just because you're going through something, that God did not, he didn't leave you.
Right.
Right.
All your
Wow.
storms is there just to make you stronger.
That's right.
Crystal, I know that you've dealt with the youth for 10 years. So if I were to ask you what you think the number one issue or fear that our youth, specifically our Black youth, is dealing with right now, with COVID, with George Floyd, with everything that is being thrown, at them, what would you say is the number one fear?
Stress and not being heard.
Wow.
I know those two things, but those are the things that I'm seeing when I talk to my clients, when I talk to any young Black youth, of not being able to cope and realizing that they're seeing this stuff all the time and don't know how to process their emotions. So giving them a space where they can feel safe and secure, whether it is talking to their parents, whether it's talking to their guidance counselor or some type of support group. Like kids, they have emotions too,
Right.
and they
That's
don't know
right.
how to process that. So you got to be able to meet the child where they are.
Right.
Right.
Right. I got a
Okay.
part B to that, Miss Krista. I'm going to flip that.
Yeah.
Equip the parents and the
Yes.
adults with some tools that
Yes.
they can be able to be open and listen to these young individuals, because a lot of times we don't think that they have problems.
That's
we don't
right.
think that they have issues. We
That's
don't think
right.
that they have experience,
That's
and
right.
we dismiss their thoughts. So equip us adults and parents on how we would be able to open up that way to, ease their fear and
Right.
be able to express themselves.
So one way that parents can make that connection and be okay is create a safe space. Allow the child to come to you and knowing that they have feelings too. And let the child know what you're going through. You're human, you're not perfect, but also realizing that if you can share what you're going through and how you're coping with your fears, that will allow the child to feel like, okay, mom, dad, they're human, they're going through some stuff too. And then these are things that I can follow after my parents. So being vulnerable, being able to just open yourself up, create safe space, and realize that first you got to make sure you're working on yourself. Whatever stressors or issues you're going through, making sure you're using your coping skills and because you're your first child's role model.
Right.
So if the child can see how you're handling your stress, I'm telling you, they'll pick that up as well.
Wow, that's
Right.
good. Now, okay, so speak to this person real quick for me. Domestic violence or abuse, whether it's the man or the woman. Now, how do you, because a lot of times it's hard for them to tell, especially if it's a guy that's being abused. So how do you deal with that when he comes to you, he's afraid, or somebody recommends this man to you, etc.? How do you deal with the male or the female when it comes to that?
So when it comes to domestic violence, you have to accept that for what they're saying. I'm not going to put no judgment on the person just because he's a male. Like, I have to make sure I remove my biases and move myself out the way in order to truly help this person get through what they're going through when it comes to domestic violence.
Yes, because a lot of times people don't, the men don't want people to know.
Yeah.
So that's another, and I'll call it, that's an unspoken fear.
Yes, it is.
I
Yes,
wouldn't
it
want nobody
is.
to know either.
Right.
I'm joking.
Well, I'm just saying, because, I'll put it in the bullying category,
no,
but there
right.
are some men that are being
There
bullied
truly
right
are.
now.
There truly are. There truly are. But Miss Crystal, I want to ask a question. I'm gonna lighten the mood just a little bit. Doc V and I, before we came on the air, we were talking about how we can overcome some of our fears. But before you answer that, I'm gonna personally ask you how to overcome this fear, because I don't see any way it can happen. All right.
Okay.
My biggest fear is needles.
Ooh.
She brought needles with her.
I was
today.
getting ready to
we
say,
talked to her
So-
earlier.
There's one way.
So I don't believe confronting it, as we said before, is going to solve this. But that's my issue. Help me heal myself. But otherwise, give us insight on what you believe the best way to overcome certain fears.
Okay, so one thing again, yes, facing it. You got to be able to face your fear. But in order to face your fear, you got to know what you're in control of. A lot of times we put so much energy in what we don't have control over. So one thing is our emotions. We're in control of our emotions. Like it's a choice. You can either feed into that fear or don't feed into that fear. It's just that simple. And so being able to face that fear and ask yourself, like, what is the worst that could really happen?
That needle could hurt.
So,
But that comes with the territory. It is what it is.
he should gradually, so he should just hold one in his hand for a while and look at
No,
it.
them tears ain't gonna stop rolling. I'm telling you. As many times as you stick me, I'm gonna cry each time. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm gonna need you to
Well,
man up.
Man.
but that is, so even though, we may laugh about that, but it is really interesting because they do tell you to face your fears. So if it's a spider, they tell you, to start off looking at a picture or holding a picture, and then, slowly let one walk across the desk, and they have this gradual thing. And so,
it's exposure therapy.
Exactly.
You can't
And so
expose me to enough
I was
needles.
just
I'm
getting ready
telling
to
y'all can't expose me to enough needles.
So there's certain things I don't know how
Take you to an
exposure therapy
acupuncture.
actually works.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So is that something you deal with too?
A little bit, but I know my fear is spiders. That's my number one fear. I get what you're saying about the needles, but again, it's a matter of you want to overcome it. You got to learn how to face it. It's like mind over matter type thing.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to take it back to the youth just for a minute, kind of with a personal experience. So I think it's also important for parents to acknowledge when you feel like your child needs help. I remember when my daughter was in kindergarten, she cried every day before school. And I just thought, well, you're in kindergarten. I mean, she was a straight A student. She was well above her reading level. I mean, she was brilliant. So I kind of ignored it. Her father did as well. First grade came around, it was the same thing. Finally, I knew something was wrong. But as a parent, I didn't want my baby to have a label. I didn't want to admit that she needed help that I could not give her. Meanwhile, struggling with anxiety and depression myself, so I knew exactly what she was feeling. But it was still everything for me to take her somewhere and say, I think she needs some help. And her dad was almost feeling like we failed as parents because we have to take her somewhere. So I will say that we did take her.
Okay.
She was diagnosed. And I mean, you're talking about crying, bawling every single day, where we would drop her off and she was sobbing. I was anti-medication. Her father was too. Long story short, we got her some help and she excelled. She was thriving. So I think it's important too, as parents, is if you notice something is off.
Yes.
I mean, a kindergartner is not going to come to you and say, I have anxiety or I have depression. What they're going to do is they're going to cry. Something else is going to happen. They're going to show you in ways, and we have
Yes.
to pay attention to those ways.
Very true. I mean, you hit it right on the nail. I mean, you're going to be the first one that's going to notice something's up with your child, and be okay for saying, I need to go get some help for my child. Like, there's no shame, no judgment or anything, because at the end of the day, you're doing your job. That's your job, to make sure that you're taking care of your baby and getting them that support and that help that they need.
That's right.
Amen.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, one of the things come to my mind, if you are walking around the house fearless or in fear,
Yeah.
that changes the whole mood, because, I can tell you this one thing real quick, not to scare anybody, but just a story I just read a couple days ago. It was a family gathering, and everybody was in this one particular room. They took a photo. And when they looked at the picture, there was another woman in the photo that wasn't in the room. And so they could see this figure. It was really clear. You could see what color the woman's hair was. Well, there's one lady who stayed upstairs, and she was also in the photo with them. And so she was talking about how now she can't really sleep. Like, it's hard for her to eat. She's having anxiety and panic attacks just from seeing that photo. And so, I was thinking about that, the whole trauma thing that's connected to fear. So you can almost relive that same emotion, that same anxiety each time you hear something or you see something, because, not to get back into, the heavyweight stuff. And I know, about the hippocampus and things like that, and where this, these different emotions are stored in the memory of these things. But when that happens, it's the same way people are that have been raped and they've been traumatized. Now, do you deal with situations like that? I mean, to me, those things seem so heavy. Like, how do you really help people get through and get over those types of
Stop that fear.
anxiety and fears?
Yeah. I mean, trauma is real.
Yeah.
Trauma lives in the body. And so it's a process. It's not going to be something that somebody can get over overnight. And so being able to really work with that person, their past, allowing them to address their past, because a lot of times we like to ignore or stuff those emotions or pretend like nothing never happened. And then once you get a trigger, everything starts, you get those flashbacks, you get that anxiety, your body responds. So when I have somebody come in that has like really significant trauma, like, I have to be really careful and really take my time with that person and get them stable emotionally before we even touch the incident that had happened.
Wow.
We gotta stabilize those emotions. We gotta give them effective coping skills to manage when their body responds to a trigger or they hear something that reminds them of their trauma. So if they can control that, then we'll be able to address the trauma in the incident that had happened.
Wow,
Right.
that's
Miss
good.
Crystal, I only have one last question.
Yeah.
I need you to open up your mind and be broad. And I know that there's no definitive answer, but as a professional, I just want to ask this question. As you stated earlier, in our world, in our time today, where we are having so many differences, the fear of, I hear, I've heard this before, and I don't remember where I heard it from, so I can't say the exact quote of it, but the fear that the white society believe that they're going to be outnumbered and they're not going to be no longer the majority. But then you have the black and other minority societies that are fear of the oppression that continues. How can we culturally, worldly, get over the fear of being inferior or subservient to different people, that we can just see ourselves as people?
Yeah. It starts with the individual. It starts with you. Learning about your biases, acknowledging that there is some prejudice, because we all have biases. We all do. But you have to be comfortable enough to admit that. Once you're able to admit that, then we can get to the work of, I can start really working and being around people that don't look like me. I can ask questions if I don't know something about a person's culture. It's okay to ask that person. I'd rather for you to ask me than just assume.
For sure.
So it starts with you. It starts with just acknowledging your prejudices, your biases, and being able to be open enough to just ask questions. And put yourself out there, because we're all human. At the end of the day, we're all human. We just have just different skin color, but at the end of the day, culture, if it's something that you really want to understand and know about, you're going to put yourself out there to do it.
Right. Thank
That's
you.
right.
Beautiful
Make that
answer.
connection.
Beautiful answer.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, good. Anybody else? Any more questions?
Oh man, we could keep it.
That's
all
it.
day. We
I
gotta
was
let
just
it
getting ready to
go.
say I didn't want to just cut it
We
off.
gotta
We
let her
having
go.
good conversation. Listen, I want to just remind everybody, our viewers, listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page. And one other thing before we go, because I would like to end this particular topic with a word
Okay.
or just a scripture from God. So I'm thinking about peace right now. And last night I mentioned about Peter walking on the water, and as he took his eyes off of God, because we talked a little bit about focus.
Right.
And so he lost focus and he started paying attention to the things that was going on around him. And so we have to be reminded not to look too deep into the things that we see around us. And so that can throw our focus off. But there's a scripture that talks about the peace I leave with you. I believe it's John 14 something.
Yes,
Do
yes.
you have that
Yes,
scripture
it's
you can
actually
share?
John, the 14th chapter, the 27th
Okay,
verse.
John 14:27.
Yes, and it reads, "Peace is what I leave with you. It is my own peace that I give you. I do not give you it as the world does. Do not be worried and upset. Do not be afraid." So he's saying he gives us his peace, not
Yes.
like the world give you peace.
And so, what, he gave us his peace.
His peace.
And so, my question I'll ask everyone, and even the panel, as we get out of here, think about this. Have you left your peace somewhere? Yes. So you need to make sure you find your peace and you hold your peace, and don't let fear control you.
Right.
This is Neutral Voices. I want to say thank you so much to Crystal Kelly for hanging
Thank you,
out
Miss
with
Crystal.
us.
Come
Thank
back and
you.
visit us again.
Amazing
Most
conversation.
definitely.
Yes, and thank you. I'm sure you have helped someone. Can you tell us one more time before we leave how we can touch bases with you, how they can
Yeah,
find you?
For sure. Crystal Kelly at Oak Tree Guidance and Wellness here in Fort Wayne. The office number, if you're seeking counseling, is 260-570-4515. Through the Society of Black Mental Health Professionals. .com. We have our website that you can go to know more about us. And then also we're on Facebook and Instagram. So there's multiple ways you can contact me. But again, Psychology Today is a really great resource if you're looking for a particular therapist, especially somebody that look like you. Psychologytoday.com.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Neutral Voices. And don't forget to click like and share, subscribe to our YouTube page, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Yes, with the team.
Yes. Neutral Voices Youth will be
Yes.
in the house.
Yes.
And also touching bases just a tad bit on just a little bit.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.